Hey, this is Craig Nadeau from the Bull Strong Podcast. Excited today to have Caitlin Bullock with us. She's from Enta Solutions. She is quite a dynamo, has so much on the go, it's quite mind-boggling. In any case, let's jump right into it, and this is Caitlin Bullock.
Cool. Okay, well, Caitlin, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Caitlin Bullock. I'm Craig Nadeau with the Bull Strong Podcast. Great to have you on the show. And hopefully we can have a good conversation and just learn a little bit more about you. I'm curious about a lot about what you guys have been doing. And I do have a bit of a curiosity, a lot about culture and company branding and that sort of thing.
Yeah.
And as you know, like our business at Partner, we do staffing. And so we're always running head to head into companies with, it's kind of the external message that they put out. And then when we have candidates going into those companies, they're being hit with these external messages. So in any case, welcome to the show. How are you?
I'm well. Thank you. Thank you for having me on.
Good. And so your company, you're running a company and it's called, tell us about
Enta Solutions. Yeah.
Okay. And what's the quick summary of the business? We're going to link it so people can look, but what's the quick summary?
Absolutely. Me and my business partner, Adam Colazetti, started Enta 2013, and we started out to animate business culture, helping businesses take it off the wall and put it into action. So really implementing the values, the vision, and the mission and making it real.
Yeah. Why did you get into it?
That's a great question. It was a bit of a personal journey. I'm an engineer.
Yeah, I saw that. That's pretty neat.
Right. And so, and like, you ever do those personality tests like the Myers-Briggs or that, right?
Yes.
Okay, so I actually test like way extreme in the percentile of like extremely strategic and extremely motivated. I'm essentially predisposed to be like a tyrannical leader, like bulldoze of anybody over. And in fact, my first career, I worked for a big construction company and my nickname was the Bulldog. Right. So it was not my natural state. My natural state was very strategic and motivated and just get it done kind of. And, when I started out 7 years with that construction company, and then I decided, because they weren't moving as fast as I wanted to move, I'm like, I'll start my own business, as one does. And then I had my first client, and about 3 months in, they very nicely pulled me aside and said, we're going to put you into some extensive emotional intelligence training.
Oh, perfect.
Right. So at the same time, what was happening is, as 1 year married and my marriage was failing. And I had to take a look at myself. And I couldn't take my walls down. I had built up all these walls. I couldn't take them down. Like I didn't know how to connect with my husband. And in order to save my marriage, I did marriage counseling. So at the same time, here I am getting all these skills about and knowledge about EQ training, but then I'm having to practice it.
Right.
And like, despite it not being my natural state, I was learning and practicing. And then I started putting it into practice in all aspects of my life. And then there's this epiphany that like, it doesn't have to be your natural state to show up with an aligned culture and to show up values first, and to, you can practice it, and it's a practice every day. And so that was the epiphany I had from a personal standpoint. That really led me to see the power of living a culture.
Right. And now you have a passion for sharing that.
Yeah, every day. Absolutely.
It's interesting going through business school in the past, and every time you go through business school of any kind, they're always like, okay, we're going to have a whole like lesson about company missions and values. And then okay, write down the 8 things or whatever, and then stick it on the wall. We have it in our office. We have the values, but then I would imagine at least half the time people don't really know what they are, because they're too, I don't know. It's like you need to live values, not just not just the
Yeah.
ball.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. You do it. It's got to show up in the behaviors, right? Otherwise,
Mm,
it's just fluff. But you like, it's so funny when you said that you went to business school and they say, okay, now's the lesson on values, and everybody, you know
yeah,
how many people I see do that? Like, oh yeah, here we
yeah,
go. Because companies don't put it into action, or people don't put it into action and live by it, and that's the biggest challenge. So the easy part's defining it.
yeah. Do you find that, like, I don't know, you haven't been in the business world for 100 years like some of us, but do you find things have evolved over the COVID timeframe, like where, like for culture, like I'm thinking specifically
Yeah.
branding, that's changed?
Yeah, I would say we might have been a little bit ahead of our time, especially in Calgary,
Mhm.
right? You know, we have this kind of old oil and
Cowboy.
gas
Yeah.
cowboy
Cowboy.
mentality
Yeah.
that has really taken the lead. And a lot of companies, they were, you know, good is the biggest impediment to great, right? They're good
Yeah.
enough. So
Yeah.
like they didn't need to look deeper.
Right.
And I think COVID changed the dynamic a lot, both from an economic standpoint as well from like doing this hybrid work and having to
Sure.
connect with people and having to try to switch our mindset around performance,
Right.
right? Yeah. Did you find that as
Yeah.
well?
Yeah. I did. I think it put a pretty big spotlight on a number of different things in the workplace, and one of them being, like, what is culture? You kind of have to relook at it, because if half your staff aren't working there, then how do you establish a culture with remote workers? I
Right.
think a lot of our clients really struggled with that.
Big time. Big time. That's not easy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think we saw too, like there was maybe broadly, and this is, probably anyone who was in a, corporate commercial environment where, you had metrics of success. I think there was certainly a push towards, we're not here just to sit around and work. We're here to actually, the end result is what matters. And so
Yeah.
you can't just enjoy your company. You can't just enjoy sitting here and enjoy the people you work with. That's in the past. Like, you have to get down to business now, and you're being measured.
Yeah. On results and not the time it takes, or not,
Yeah.
you know, putting in your 9 to 5,
Yeah.
right? And I think
Yeah.
that was a huge mentality shift, is that people can get a lot done, you know, on more flexible hours.
Right.
And as long as it's
Yeah.
done, right?
You know,
You
it
know,
was,
and
it was an interesting kind of a side note. One of our clients, it kind of made this like really poignant to us, was they had they had a group of developers. So the company is a software development company. They had a kind of the group of executive and sales and accounting, kind of the core group of the company. And then they had hired contractors to do the software development work. So the work was, very heady. And then they discovered over COVID, those people didn't have to be in the office and couldn't be in the office. And
Mhm.
then as COVID went on, they started to realize, like, these people aren't really, they're in our company, but they're not really part of our company. Like, they impact the end result product that we're doing, but who they are and interacting with them isn't, like, it's not critical to the function of the overall business. And then through that realization, they ended up outsourcing all the IT development outside of the city. And so
Yep.
then those people, some of them lost their jobs over that, but they just realized that that part of the company wasn't even really part of the company, because it was being outsourced. It was interesting, actually. It was a very neat kind of transition from one thing to the next.
Yeah. And you know, like I think we're seeing that a lot of in the major tech
Mhm.
companies, there's a lot of layoffs happening, a lot of people getting let go, you know, in Twitter and Shopify,
Yeah,
and we're hearing it in the news. And but a lot of them are switching to a contractor model, so they're hiring some of those skills back as
right.
contractor. But from a culture perspective, I honestly think that you still need alignment with your contractors the same
Yeah.
as you do in your
Yeah.
employees, right?
Yeah. Yeah. They need to know. Yeah. And I guess that would play out into what they do, like, and
Yeah.
how they perform and the work that they're doing. So yeah.
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 So
That's,
it might be a shift in dynamic on how we connect with businesses coming up in the future, but I still think culture is going to play an active role on profitability for sure.
Would you, like, when you say culture, do you define culture and branding as different? Like, how would you, or do you see them as different, or are they kind of synonymous?
I see them like a Venn diagram for my
Yeah,
nerds out there. They kind of overlap, right?
yeah.
So I think that culture is your brand from your employee's perspective, right?
Mhm. Yeah,
I think there's a beauty when they align, where what you see on the outside is what you see on the inside. To me, that's truth, right? I
that's good
love
insight.
that.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's good. Yeah.
I love that. And if you can get that synergy, I think that's powerful
Mhm.
because nothing is worse than a rug pull,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
So, so I think that that's a. What about you? What's your take on brand versus
Yeah.
culture?
Well, I guess, and maybe from the kind of classical sort of educationally, we would say branding is the color of the box, or it's the, like, how does the external world, very much like what you're saying, how does the external world perceive you? And then culture is the, like, do I like coming to work? That's kind of how it's evolved, is like, we get asked that question a lot at work, and it's like, what's their culture like? And it's like, I know it's really hard to put your finger on it, but you could easily put your finger on brand and say, well, they're the number one cereal box, that's out there, and they're blue and they have a toucan on the front or whatever. It's hard to do
Sure.
that with culture, because
And
culture is different.
I think we put such a limited perspective on brand. Like it's
Yeah.
a lot of people make it visual, but brand is also how you sense the company. So there's audio branding, there's
Hmm.
everything. Like it's the whole experience. Like how did you feel as you interfaced with this client or with this company?
Yeah.
How do they make you feel along the process? There's companies that, one that comes to mind, like Il Makiage is like a makeup company.
Oh, okay.
And
Hmm.
and when you buy from them, they say, we're so excited that you decided to buy from us. We gave you something extra special. And they throw in like a very expensive, high quality piece
Wow.
in as extra.
Wow.
And it's like, oh, I do feel special.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's part of brand. They made
Yeah.
me feel a certain way, but we just put so much focus on visual because it's our primary
Yeah.
sense, I
For sure.
think, right?
Yeah.
So
Huh.
yeah.
I think you had watched that one podcast we cut a while back. And then it got me thinking about Hermes, or however someone wants to pronounce it, Hermes or
And
Hermes.
then yeah.
But like, I don't know if you've ever shopped there, but you walk in and you'd be like, I want to buy this bag, and I'll give you, pick a number. It doesn't even matter what the number is. They said, no, we can't sell it to you.
Yeah.
But you can buy this belt buckle, or you can buy this belt for $1,000. And then
Yeah.
you can come back in a couple months, and then we'll talk about the next thing, and then the next thing, and then maybe a year or two from now you can buy the purse. And it's like, wow,
You have to be
that's a different
vetted,
brand. Yeah,
right?
that's a
Yeah.
that's amazing. Very exclusive.
That is, it's prestige, and that's what their
Yeah,
brand is. And I'm sure that's
exclusive.
probably their culture inside as well,
Probably, yeah.
right?
How does a company, like, and this is like, I have a dozen clients that probably should be listening. How does a company maybe even take that first steps into developing a culture that's palpable? And maybe there's more to this question, but like, they need to develop a palpable culture so that when someone that they're trying to entice to join, they can feel it when they walk in the door. Like, we've had, maybe this is like a background story of a horror story, is like, we get to know companies well, and right, and we try to sell them and make them sound good and exciting, and in many cases they are, but not at the surface. Like, if you were to walk in the door, everyone's heads down, they got the little banker thing on, they're adding numbers, but if you were to talk to the people who have been there a couple of years, they love it. It's a great situation. And we've had people interviewing companies, and the cultural thing that they feel at the outset is, wow, this is it's very black and white. It's very step by step. These people aren't good people. And it's weird because it would be like dating. If you meet someone for the first time, and you're going to get that 30-second, like, I like this person, I'm going to connect. And I think employers need to think about that when they're interviewing. But how
Yeah.
does a company start building that brand, so that, or not brand, but culture, I guess, so that they can push it out there so that new people can feel it too?
Well, it's really dependent on where they are in their life cycle. I always say it's much easier to grow a culture than it is to fix it.
Hmm.
So if you're not making culture part of your strategy from the get-go, then you will let somebody else drive your bus.
Hmm.
And so it depends where they are in that life cycle, because you're going to come at it with a different lens if you're reimagining your culture versus if you're defining it for the first time.
Right.
But I always love to get everybody's insight, because it's easier to start from a place of truth than it is to pretend like that's your culture when it's not in the
Right.
behaviors.
Yeah.
That's a bigger gap than saying, here's who we are, and here's one place that we'd like to go, right?
Mhm.
And start that way. So
Mhm.
definitely, like, pull your people in, right? That's the first thing we do. We pull everybody, we get all their insights, we collect it, and we're engineers, so we
Yeah.
nerd out on the data for a little
Yeah.
bit, and then go through these series of workshops there. And it's an emotional journey. Like, this isn't the 80s where you went on a corporate retreat, got wasted, and came back with 5 words that you agreed upon. It's an emotional journey. Right?
Yeah. That's right.
You got to believe it with your heart and soul, and then you got to live it. And you won't be
Right.
perfect every day. And you got to be
Yeah.
permission to fail.
I like that we can create video and online content, so that when people say, I'm trying to figure out the culture of this business, they can go in, they can just show
Do
me a
it.
couple of videos, and that starts to give a feeling for who's who.
Yeah. And that's why we got into video, actually, is
Right.
because culture is both what you do and
Mhm.
what you say. And video is so powerful communication,
Right.
right? So being able to storytell through culture, being able to really represent your company through video is huge
Yeah. Right.
way,
Yeah.
right, to do that. So that's why video is part of what we do, for that
Right.
exact reason. Is like, it has to be in everything you say, as well as follow up with the actions, right? Nothing's
Yeah.
worse. Have you seen a company where their actions don't match their words,
Yep. There's
right?
there's plenty. There's tons.
Right.
So
Yeah. It's sad.
yeah. Yeah, I like the video content idea. It seems to be like it in some ways there's some really good tie-ins into the staffing the staffing and employment world,
Yeah.
where you can really start like an employer. It's funny, one of the big shifts, sorry, one of the big
Mhm.
shifts that we see in employment is that I think employers, if we go back far enough, you just look back, say 40 years, let's say,
Yeah.
employers um back, this is super generalized, but employers from long ago treated it like they were letting you into their kind of their thing, where the golden gates would open and you'd be allowed into the situation.
Chosen.
Yeah, very much so. And then
Yeah.
I think where that's changed now is that employers are spending a significant amount of time marketing to candidates, and
Hmm.
they're trying to create this Disneyland sort of feel for their business that, wow, I couldn't imagine working anywhere else. This is going to be so amazing.
Right.
So
Yeah.
I think they're spending a lot of time online trying to promote that sort of feel, so that people will be like, yeah, of course I want to work there. That'd be a great place.
Well, I think you're right. You nailed it, that there's been a generational shift, right? We're the Tinder generation. You both have to swipe right. Like, you both
Yeah.
have to like each other.
Yeah.
And I think you come up with this probably a lot in staffing, and you kind of said it, like, you have a knack for telling fit, right?
Mhm.
You can
Yeah.
have your resume and the skill set and have it's all there. They've got the education, they've got the experience, but is it the right fit? And
Yeah.
that's something that's key in staffing.
Yeah. That would be similar to, like, and sometimes we compare staffing to dating services, like where,
Right.
like, it really is in a very elaborate dating service where we involve the client who's, one person in the dating, and then the candidate who's the other person. And there has to be some chemistry, there has to be some fit and alignment to people that already exist there, and that sort of thing. So it's really interesting. And it's tough too, because the laws they're laid out, the laws as they're laid out, um, you can't discriminate based on hardly anything, but at the same time you also need alignment. And so that, if you have one person who just isn't fitting the group, it's really obvious, and you can feel it, and it creates some tensions and that sort of thing. But at the same time, the client needs the people to do the job, and if you're an engineer and you haven't done the thing that they want you to do, you're not going to be able to do it. It's kind of that simple. And it doesn't matter how good you fit, how much they like you.
Yeah.
So we're always we're playing sides all the time. It can be really tough.
Totally. Yeah, I get that 100%. Like, if they align with your values and they get you results, we call those the unicorns.
Yeah.
Right? Like, no brainer. You got ones that, align with your values, but they aren't quite your highest performers. And I call those the American Idol contestants, right? Like, they just need a little coaching, give them a couple singing lessons.
Yeah.
Right. And then you have your anchors, like they're stopping your ship from going anywhere because they don't align with your values and they don't perform. And then the last quadrant, pardon my language, are the assholes.
Mm-hmm.
And they're the hardest, man. They're the hardest because they perform, they get the results, but they don't align with your values. And if you don't get rid of those guys, and that's a hard thing to do, because you're eating profit at that point, right? If you don't get rid of them, you'll lose your unicorns because they won't believe you.
Yeah, what's an interesting, I would say, I'll add a subset to the last quadrant is you can have. I've just noticed there's a group of people as well that they it's almost like the con man. So you have like the subset to the asshole is the con man who says what you want. They're saying they love it, everything's great, and then but they're not performers, but they act like they're your best performer. Everything's good, but then secretly
they're the magicians, smoke and mirrors.
And then as the world starts to catch up with them, that hey, this person's not really hitting it. Yeah. And then what comes out is, well, it's your fault. Right. It's company's fault. It's not my fault. Like, I'm obviously one of your best employees, and but you guys are a terrible company to work for, and I need to leave now. It's like mind-boggling. Yeah.
Let me tell you this story. So I worked for a client, and they were like a project services company, right? Okay. So they did projects, and they had a project manager who would railroad his team. He'd run them over for results, and he would get like on budget, on schedule projects, and he would get promoted.
Beautiful.
And so what ended up happening is, like, during a few of his projects, about 5 really good people left. And I don't know if you know this, but like of course you know this, the cost to replace like a senior technical person is like $160,000.
Yeah, totally. Yeah.
In time to like review resumes, to like interviews. That's it. It's gone. It's out the window. It's burnt.
Yep.
So like we're talking about $3.2 million of turnover this company suffered because of this one guy.
Yeah.
He kept getting promoted because of the results.
Right.
Their number one core value was we put people first.
But they didn't say which people. They didn't say,
no, apparently it's
just whoever.
Just, right. But I mean, like, that $3.2 million never hit his projects. And I think that's one of the biggest cruxes, is like the turnover rate doesn't get applied to the actual performance analysis.
Yeah. Yeah, that's like turnover is I think all companies these days are experiencing like astronomical turnover. It just the numbers have got to be just outrageous now. So.
It is. Yeah, I think they're like 70% of employees are currently disengaged or are actively looking.
Yeah.
Right.
And companies like ours don't help that.
Come over here.
Calling them. Yeah. But like we easily talk to more people who are happy where they are and don't really want to look, as we do. There's people that are looking, but we talk to an awful lot of people that aren't looking.
Yeah.
That's our new world. But one of the things we certainly see is, as time goes by, as every decade clocks by, the longevity that people have to any one client is rapidly going downhill. Like, it's really almost turning into what do you call it, when it's you're just taking on projects. Like, that's the way people are treating it. Like, everything's contract work.
Everything's contract work. Yeah.
And then And then you feel bad because the employers they're talking about, yeah, we're trying to create this culture of, like we're going to move you along and move you up, and it's going to be so great to work here. But then really people are just saying, I'm here for, 2 years, and then I'm on to something different, and then I'm on to something different. And yeah,
And I mean, there'll always be some turnover, but realistically, this next generation coming up is changing the game because
yeah,
they want to have an impact and they want to belong,
yeah,
right? And so this is where it's really important for companies to know, like, what is their purpose, and
mhm,
to really like live by it and communicate it, and to reinforce that purpose and bring that back to the people, saying, here's the impact we're having. You were a critical part of that, right? That is going to be so huge for loyalty, right?
right,
And I think that there's especially after the pandemic, you felt a shift in people realizing that I'm not going to work an 80-hour work week for
yeah,
nothing,
yeah,
right? I can feel fulfilled with a lot less than I thought I
right,
could.
yeah.
And that's going to change the game big time.
I think so. I think you're right. So
Mhm.
here's a tough question for you then.
Ooh, okay.
What's your company culture?
Oh, like our values
I don't know.
are
Well, yeah, I want to see the board on the wall that has the 5 listed.
ours aren't on the wall. They're in our hearts,
Okay,
our
good.
minds, and they're on our website. But
Yeah.
like,
Okay.
no, our values are candor, trust, passion, innovation, and we really believe that you can make a better world through business.
Mhm.
And we want to help people wake up just super excited to plug into their job and work with their team to make that impact and make that better world. And
Right.
that's what we believe. Um, we're very lucky that our employees show up with our culture all the time, and
Mhm.
when they don't, it's okay. We let them know, we give them candid feedback, and we recognize that it's okay to be practicing. I always say leadership is not a position. Leadership is a practice.
Yeah.
Like, and I'm not going to be perfect every day. And there's some days that I don't live up to my values the way I expect myself to. And I got to, tomorrow's going to be better. I got this. But my team gives me that grace
Yeah.
to not be perfect, right? And we do that back to them. And I think that's what really makes it strong, is you're not going to be perfect every day, and that's okay.
Yeah. And so what happens if, like in a small team, you have a small team and one of those team members just culturally, they're not rowing that one, or what happens? Are they out? Like, is that a training issue, or like some of that stuff that's tough to train. You need to
You
be
want to
nicer to your teammates, or I don't know what it is. You need to have more candor.
It's got to be timely. It's got to be
Yeah.
explicit. So I'll tell you a story. We had the story, I call it the $10,000 sound bite that bit us.
Mm-hmm.
Two of our leaders, they had a disagreement over a sound bite. One of them literally wanted to go ba ba, and the other one wanted to go ba ba ba. That was the disagreement, and they did not use candor, trust, and they did not show up with our values. It
Yeah.
escalated. It caused so much turmoil, and it was a week later before it got resolved, and it pulled me in, it pulled Adam in, my business partner Adam. We got involved. It became this escalation unnecessarily.
Yeah.
And so they finally figured it out together. They came to me and apologized, and I said, I'm going to ask you to do something, and it's going to be really hard, but it's going to be very valuable. And they said, what do you want me to do, Caitlin? I said, I want you guys to work together, and at our next in-person meeting, I want you to share this with both of your teams and the whole company, what you learned about disputes, how you could have done it better. And I want you to update our dispute resolution practice so that we can all learn from what happened here, right? And they looked at me like, are you kidding? That's going to be really vulnerable. And I said, I know, I'd really appreciate it if you do it. They did it. And it was so impactful to see everybody on the team come together, really like they went on this emotional journey with it, because it was still raw. Like it was like still so raw, but they went on
Everyone's
an emotional
crying.
journey with them. Yeah. And everybody came together and was like, okay, it's going to happen, but look at how
Yeah.
strong they are now. Look at
Right.
how, and our team just, it bonded us in such a way because they knew it was permission to fail and be okay and to learn, right? So now we created psychological safety, which is a fundamental
Right.
of culture.
So which one did they go with? I thought that was the punchline of your story.
I never asked. I never wanted to hear the sound.
Dang. They could have, yeah.
But I was
Could
so
have done
proud of
both.
them. Yeah, they could. Yeah.
Yeah.
A/B test.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I was so proud of them, and they came to me after and said, "I see it. I see why you asked us to do that."
Right.
And I
Hmm.
said, "Yeah."
And that's culture. That's culture too. Like just, knowing that this is how we deal with conflict, like it builds that culture. So
Yeah. And knowing that it's not like a one and done, like yeah, they didn't act in alignment with our culture, and that's okay. We're working towards it every day,
yeah.
right?
I
So
think it would be interesting because if you were to do here's our 5 core values, on the board, but then at some level you start to think it's like, okay, well, now what do we do? Because you're not going to write down on the board, you're going to say we come to meetings on time because that's respectful, and then we don't leave our dishes in the sink. Like, there's ends up being this like, we're trying to be respectful, I guess, if that's one, and here's all the things you can do, and then it turns into a 700-page book about I don't know what
there
would
was
happen.
right, but that's kind of what you have to translate it to, is like, this is our value, but how will I recognize it when it shows up?
Mm-hmm.
Right. And then how will I give recognition when it shows up? And this is key to that, because you're reinforcing behaviors, but a lot of people, when they give recognition, they'll say something vague like, "Hey, thanks for that."
Right. Yeah.
And what they need to do is say, "Thank you for showing up with our value this. It
Right.
had this impact and it made me feel this.
Hmm.
I appreciate you." Like, those
Yeah.
words and plug in the blanks is going to be way more impactful to reinforcing that behavior and that value than, "Hey, thanks for that."
Yeah, absolutely. Here's a kind of a funny, you just reminded me of this. I was driving earlier today and there's the public worker strikes going on right now.
Yeah.
And I read one of their signs and I was kind of shocked actually, because we're talking about, Government of Canada, Public Works, and it said raise, not praise. I was like, so are you getting too much praise and not enough money? Like what, like a vast majority of the people I think we talk to, yeah, money's important, but they want someone to praise them for their successes. I thought that was really an odd message to send out, that they just want the money. It's just about the money.
Yeah.
It's not about because praise is kind of culture. Unless money is, and then money's the culture.
Well, I mean, there's going to be some people that's their
Yeah.
just money, and you're not going to get around that. But the fact of the matter is you can. My sister-in-law, for example, she worked for a firm, it got acquired,
Mm-hmm.
and the culture was very different.
Oh, I bet. Yeah.
Right? And she's a senior technical engineer,
Mm.
and it was horrible. She didn't like it. It never got better. She stayed for as long as she had to stay for in the acquisition
Yeah.
agreement. And then she took a job for 40% less.
Hmm.
Now,
Wow.
being a
That's rare, to be honest. So,
it's not
yeah.
anymore.
Interesting.
You're seeing a huge, especially this next generation, you're seeing a huge shift as to, do I have work-life balance? Do I feel happy about going to work? Do I like what I'm doing and who I'm with? You're seeing a shift
Hmm.
because, like, I've heard many stories like this.
Really? Wow.
Yes. And she left, and in the next month, 20 other people left out of that division. Mass exodus. Oh yeah, I know you're calculating it up, right? And
Yeah.
so, like, mass exodus, and they had to sell their projects to their
Wow.
competitors.
That's brutal.
Now you're not just talking about cost of turnover, you're talking about reputational cost, you're talking about so much.
Yeah.
Right? So, I mean, when people are like, "Oh, I don't know if I have money to invest in that fluffy stuff," I'm like, "Oh."
Yeah. But
Right.
what's interesting about that story as well would be that, on one hand, you would then, it would be easy to create a narrative that, okay, well, the company that lost all of its staff, they just have a terrible culture and they need to fix their culture. But that was a viable business that had a culture and there was people working there. The
Yep.
other business was a viable culture that had people working there, but you can't cross-pollinate because it just didn't work. Like, yeah, that's interesting.
Well, and a lot of times then we see in mergers and acquisitions is they just
Yeah.
force it. They get
Yeah.
the financial systems aligned, they get this, but they don't handle the people alignment. And there's a huge loss. I think that the stat is like 70% over the next 3 years after an acquisition will turn over.
That's lots.
That's huge.
Yeah.
That's huge. Like if you could eliminate half of that,
Right.
you'd be laughing all the way to the bank.
Yeah.
Right? So
Does
it's
it
big.
like, do you think, like, I don't know, not to beat up that story, but like, do you think if those two, and maybe the question is it's a who question, but like if you had the two CEOs or chairman of the board or whatever, if they came together and they were aligned, do you think that that trickles down? Or like, I guess I wonder when, when you have a crotchety person at the top who's just, if it was based on them, they're not going to have an enjoyable culture. But then you kind of have some thought leaders or something where the culture begins here, or is it always at the top, or does it come up from the bottom, or where's culture coming from?
Yeah, okay, so you're going to have a culture, whether you've defined it or not. It's going to exist, and it'll exist in the behaviors that you reinforce. So it's not a simple answer to your question, because I've seen crotchety leaders, but they have a really good middle management team that's cohesive and they run it. And that management level is actually your highest layer of influence. If you think about connection points, right? You've got your C-suite who manages the middle management, and you've got your middle management who touches both the C-suite, plus they have all of their direct reports. They're the influencers, and we call them the icy middle, because if you can't move them, you're not going anywhere, right? That's where you have to have that. They're really the influencers in your company, and they've got to be aligned. They've got to be on board, because if they're not, doesn't matter how much that CEO or COO is pushing.
Right.
They're pushing against a wall. So, but they've got to recognize and reinforce behaviors. If they let things go, like that PM, if they reinforce the wrong behaviors, they're going to drive a culture against it. So like, it depends how they show up when it's hard.
It's interesting that, sometimes the behavior component of the culture turns into performance management. And we, then you have to look at, well, how often are you meeting with people? Are you doing 365 interviews? Or or 360 interviews? Like, where do you start to go with that? Because that's not just a, one level. I think if I ask my kids, what's company culture? They would say, well, they always have ring toss at the company barbecues every 2 weeks, right? Like that would be what culture is to them.
Yeah.
It's fun to go to the barbecues, and then we go to work, so it's different. So, but then there's that whole performance management component, because it would have caught that guy, that PM, right? Where it's like, yeah, you're profitable, but that's only one of the 5 things that we're talking about here today. And the other one is everyone hates you.
Yeah. You're right. No one will work on your team anymore.
Yeah.
Yeah. It does tie in, like recognition and performances, like performance of how you're living up to the behaviors and the values, right? Is definitely one of the aspects that you can really do to promote, right? You talk about like taking those words, put them into action. That'll help promote those. But I always say culture is not the foosball table in the kitchen.
Yeah.
Because I can't tell you the number of companies I walk into and they have a squash court or a basketball court, or they have like a foosball table. Oh, there's ice cream in the freezer. I'm like, yeah, that doesn't build a culture. Those don't drive behaviors.
Yeah. And that may be even old stuff. Like, I think that was very chic at one point, where you started to pull IT people into massive pod spaces, and there was tremendous. I remember back, it was probably in like close to 2000 era. And there was a couple companies that I used to work with as clients, and they were all IT companies. They all had sleeping rooms. And so the people could sleep there, and and that was a thing, like everybody built that out when they did their renos. Now that doesn't exist. So
No, we
people
work
are
from home
working
and just
from,
go.
they're working from bed. They just basically tilt their head back.
Right?
I'm already there. Yeah. What
Yeah, no,
about personal branding? Can people that must be part of the conversation as well, right?
absolutely. And like one of the most profound things I ever did was discover my personal core values.
Mm-hmm.
And
Are you
they're
gonna
not
share it?
this,
You can tell
yeah,
us.
yeah. Candor's one of them, same as my company. So candor as one, accountability is one for me, kindness is my biggest one.
Mm-hmm.
Optimism and innovation or improvement,
We
essentially.
should just let everyone know that Candor is not a bird. That's
No, no,
Condor.
condor, this candor. But like every value has
Yeah,
a balcony and a basement, right?
yeah.
Like look at candor. Candor can be really cruel if I don't temper it with kindness
Mm-hmm.
and empathy. And so every value you have can be positive and negative. It's finding and living in that positive element of the value.
Yeah.
But that was one of the most profound things I did is in my personal life was discover my core values. And I know they say it in what is it? Habits of highly
Yeah,
effective
yeah, yep.
people, right? Oh, go do it like it's easy.
Right. Yeah.
It's not easy, but it is profound because then you start to see the world with a layer of, oh, that's why I
Mm.
showed up like that, or that's why I didn't get along with him, is because he was always late and my accountability flag is going, and I'm like,
Yeah, right.
it's driving me nuts.
Yeah.
Right. But then I can start having conversations and saying, like, look, I'm going to give you some feedback because this rubs against one of my personal core values, and this is why it's frustrating me. By
Mm-hmm.
starting having conversations like that, you're really starting to connect on a level. It's not a personal attack. It's like, this is why it's bothering me because I understand myself. Right.
That's,
And I think it's important.
yeah.
Do
It's
you know
interesting.
yours?
No
Craig.
idea. I'd actually have to think about that. I wasn't prepared for this today.
Sorry, I'm putting you on the spot.
No, but where it took me was just thinking about how like each of us have this, not everyone has like a kind of their work presence, then they have their home life presence, they maybe have a presence with their friends and family, but now we've layered in the whole this presence, like you and me are who we are on this camera, and if you didn't know us, we may be horrible people outside of this conversation, it's hard to say, but we
Yeah.
also have like these Instagram type presences that
Mm.
it's almost like you have to manage it. It's crazy. Like it's almost tough to, sometimes I look at some of the stuff that we do online and I think, is that really the message? Like, is that like, it's really real, but at the same time, is that a message that I'd want to share? And then as soon as you make that, you cross that bridge, then it's not honest anymore because you're sharing what isn't real, right? You're sharing only an image of something that people are looking at.
Yeah. And I think like from a digital like social media perspective,
Yeah.
when I coach people, I tell them to think about what that is. And it is okay to have a safety box
Mm-hmm.
of things
Yeah.
that you don't want to talk about,
Yeah.
right? Or things that you won't talk about, right? And that is
Right.
okay, but it's better to know where you stand. Like
Right.
I don't often share my kids or my mom journey. It's
Right.
rare. And I might drop it in, but it's not part of my brand,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because that's in my safety box and that's okay.
Yeah.
Because
That's
some things are personal and that's okay, that we don't have to put everything out there. And I think it's a matter of finding where your comfort zone is and what are you trying to achieve with your brand, right?
mm-hmm.
What's the call to action as your personal brand?
Yeah.
So
That's,
yeah, like so I think there's that balance, right? You don't have to share everything. Otherwise, sometimes people overshare a lot of things.
I think I think when I think about like when I think about personal brand is sometimes maybe my mind wanders to what someone would ever say, during my eulogy after I'm gone. Like what is
Mm,
that? What's that thing that kind of settled out, after you shook out off all the dirt and stuff. And I think if I had to guess, I would say it has to be that I'm probably to a fault helpful, and I like seeing people succeed around me, and like I want people to win and really experience the height of their potentials
Yes.
if they can. And I guess I can't force anyone to experience their potentials, but I like helping people to do that. So I don't know. That's part of it. I got to find one cool word like candor that I can layer that with, but I don't have it. So
That's okay. We'll talk after this and I'll take you through a whole exercise,
so
help you.
fun.
Yeah. It's I love that though. I love that you know what you wanted of that. It's
Mhm.
almost your purpose is
Yeah,
to help people unlock their utmost potential, right? That's
yeah.
huge. Once you know your purpose, right?
Mhm.
You know what you're here to do and where you want what you envision the world to be. Like watch out, nothing will stop you at that point,
Yeah,
right? Because it's like it's coming from a place way deeper than, oh, I'm an engineer or I'm
right.
a staffing company. It's
Yeah.
no. I'm unlocking human potential and creating greater
Mm.
joy in this world. That means
Great.
so much more, right? So
You know
I
what
love.
would be, what would be a fun kind of, we'll do this in the next time we get together, but
Okay.
we should find and do like a little case study on a company that neither of us will ever have the opportunity to have as a client, and pick apart what their culture is purported to be and what their presence says about them. Wouldn't that be
Ooh.
interesting? Like to have 3 or 4 companies and just kind of look at them that way?
Yeah,
That would be
totally.
interesting. So
Like see all their reviews on Glassdoor and then be like, that's not how they portray
yeah,
themselves.
yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that'd be really
that, and yeah,
interesting.
like they'd have online media, they'd have, yeah, like it would be
Hmm.
interesting just to kind of take a look at that. That would be kind of a neat experience, I think.
I like that. I think
Do
that's
a
a
whole
cool
series.
experiment. I'm
Yeah,
in.
do a big
Yeah, let's
series.
do
Start with
it.
McDonald's.
Right?
I'm loving it while I'm eating it, but
Yeah.
3 hours later, I'm not loving it anymore.
Yeah,
Very
absolutely.
fun. Well, listen, I have to get into another call here just
Yes.
shortly, and I'd love to talk with you offline just a little bit as well. And then we should book something, down the road just a little bit as well. So that would
Yeah,
be
I
super
love that.
fun. But it's awesome to have you, of course. And
Thank
yeah,
you.
you're a pleasure to speak with. So hopefully we
Thank
have
you,
you on
Craig.
more in the future. So
I really appreciate it. It's been an absolute joy talking with you, and I think we have a lot of good conversations to come. So
yeah,
thank you very
awesome.
much.
Great. Thanks for your time.